The series of NDT. Now I am going to describe about the magnetic particle inspections. These are all in the processes of aircraft materials, and we have seen corrosion and various metals and properties, as well as how the corrosion has been removed, hardness testing and all that in different videos. Now C is magnetic particle inspection, the non-destructive inspection. And also I have to mention that after this NDT I will be going for the welding and brazing and soldering. These all will come to meet the need of aircraft material processes. Now C is magnetic particle inspection, the non-destructive inspection method that is most generally used for the inspection of ferrous metal parts is magnetic particle inspection. In this method of inspection, the part is magnetized and a material which contains magnetic particles is poured or sprayed over the surface. If there are any discontinuities in the material, either on the surface or subsurface, north and south magnetic poles will form. Across the fault, and the magnetic particles will collect between the poles. Some types of subsurface discontinuities, however, do not produce half enough magnetic poles to attract the oxide and form a good indication of the fault. Magnetic particle inspection is useful for detecting cracks, splits, seams, voids and pipes that form when the metal ruptures. It is also useful for detecting cold surts and inclusions of foreign material that occurred when the metal was cast or rolled. Now, first is principle of magnetism, in which we have to read about the permanent magnets. Iron or material containing a large amount of iron can be magnetized. Within the material there are many weak magnetic fields. When the material is not magnetized, these fields are oriented in such a random fashion that they cancel each other. As a result, there is no overall magnetic field of the material. Now, if the material is subjected to a strong external magnetic field, the domains as these internal magnetic fields are called will align themselves with the external field and the part will become magnetized. If the domains remains in alignment when the magnetizing force is removed, the part becomes a permanent magnet. Lines of magnetic flux are invisible lines of force that are considered to leave the north pole of the magnet at right angles to its surface and travel to the south pole. These lines repel each other so that they spread out as they leave the north pole and become most widely separated midway between the poles. Then they come together again as they enter the magnet at its south pole, again at right angles to its surface. The lines that then travel through the magnet parallel to each other. All of the lines of force form complete loops and never cross one another. In the figure, if the bar magnet is bent into a circle with a small space between its ends, which I will be giving you, there will be a line of flux within the magnet, and its ends will form a north and a south pole. However, if instead of there being a space between its and the magnet were a complete unbroken circle, there would be lines of flux within the material, but there would be no poles. Now, if there is a surface flow or a break in the ring, magnetic poles will appear, one on either side of the break, and there will be a leakage field across the break that will attract magnetic material. This is the principle that is used in magnetic particle inspection. Now number B, electromagnets. Anytime a conductor carries a flow of electrons, in bracket current, there will be the same kind of lines of magnetic flux surrounding the wire that we found passing from one pole to the other in a permanent magnet. If we grasp a conductor with our left hand in such a way that the thumb points in the direction of electron flow, that is in bracket from the negative terminal of the power source to the positive terminal, bracket closed, the fingers will encircle the conductor in the same direction that the lines of flux encircle it. Same way that there was no polarity when lines of flux flowed within the continuous ring, there will be no polarity caused by the lines of flux encircling a straight conductor. But if we form the conductor into a coil, the lines of flux will be concentrated within the coil and will spread out outside of the coil. They will behave in the same way as the lines of flux around and through the permanent magnet. The strength of this magnetic field is determined by the amount of current flow in amperes, and in the number of turns in the coil, it is measured in amperes turns. Is magnetic terms. Number one in this is magnetic flux. These are invisible lines of magnetic force that exist between the poles of a magnet, and they are assumed to flow externally from the north pole of the magnet to its south pole. One line of magnetic flux is called one Maxwell and is symbolized by the Greek letter phi. Now number 2 is flux density. Flux density is the number of lines of magnetic flux per unit area, and its unit is the Gauss. One Gauss is equal to one Maxwell line of flux in bracket per square centimeter. Number 3 is residual magnetism. This is the magnetism that remains in a material after the magnetizing force is removed. It may be detected using a field strength meter and is useful in testing certain types of materials. Number 4, permeability. The ease with which a material will conduct lines of magnetic flux is called its permeability. Number 5, retentivity. Retentivity is the ability of a material to retain some residual magnetism after the magnetizing force is removed. Only materials with a high retentivity are good candidates for the residual magnetism method of testing. Number 6 is coercive force. This is the amount of reverse magnetizing force required to remove the residual magnetism from a material. Number 7 is a hysteresis loop or B-H curve. If we plot the flux density in a material against the magnetizing force, we get a curve similar to the one which I will show in the figure. We begin with no flux and no magnetizing force at point A. Then as we increase the magnetizing force, the flux density increases rapidly at first. It then levels off until at point B, the material is saturated and there can be no more flux density regardless of the amount of magnetizing force applied. Now, when we decrease the magnetizing force, the flux will follow the curve BC rather than dropping back to A. The material will retain a flux density of A-C when the magnetizing force is reduced to 0. This is the residual magnetism In order to demagnetize the part, we must apply a coercive force of A d to reduce the flux density to 0. Number D is magnetic orientation. In order to detect a crack by the magnetic particle inspection method, the part must be magnetized in such a way that the line of flux will cross the fault as nearly perpendicular as possible. In order to do this, there are two methods of magnetization. We may use longitudinal and circular. Now, what is longitudinal? We will go for this. Number one, longitudinal magnetization. In longitudinal magnetization, the magnetizing current flows either through a coil in which the part is placed. I will be giving you a figure, or the current may flow through a coil around a soft iron yoke in either method. The magnetic field is oriented along the material, and magnetic fields will form on either side of the faults that are located across the material. Two is circular magnetizations. When the magnetizing current actually flows through the part being inspected, the lines of magnetic flux will be perpendicular to this current, and flaws or faults located along the material will be magnetized and will attract the magnetic particles. The current may be sent through the part by placing in between the heads of the magnetizing equipment. For this, there is a figure. You see this. The part is tubular. If the part is tubular, a conductive rod may be placed between the heads of the magnetizing machine to carry the current, and the tubular object is slipped over this rod. Nuts and similar small parts may be magnetized in this way. Large flat objects may be circularly magnetized by using test ports. Which are held firmly against the surface and current passing through them. The magnetic field will be oriented as shown in the figure, which I will be giving you, and will be as we see perpendicular to current that flows between the rods. Number 3 is magnetic field strength, in which A is solid non-magnetic conductor. When we pass current through a solid non-magnetic conductor, the magnetic field will build up from 0 in the center of the conductor to maximum at its outside surface, and then it will decrease as the distance from the conductor increases. At a distance of twice the radius, it will 1/2 its maximum strength. At 3 times the radius, it will be 1/3 the maximum strength, and so on. Now B is solid magnetic conductor. If we flow current through a magnetic conductor, its field strength will behave similarly to that of non-magnetic conductor, except that at its surface, the magnetic strength will be much greater, with its final strength related to permeability of the material. As we move away from the surface of the conductor, the field strength drops off from maximum in the same way it did for a non-magnetic conductor at a distance of twice the radius from the center of the conductor. the field strength will be equal to 1/2 of the field strength at the surface of a non-magnetic conductor of the same size and shape as the magnetic conductor being magnetized. Is hollow non-magnetic conductor. The field strength around a hollow non-magnetic conductor acts in much the same way as that surrounding a solid non-magnetic conductor, except that within the hollow center there is no magnetic field at all. The field builds up from the inside surface and reaches its maximum at the outside surface. Now D is hollow magnetic conductor. The field strength surrounding a hollow magnetic conductor behaves in the way we would predict from studying hollow non-magnetic conductors and solid magnetic conductors. There is no field within the hollow center of the conductor, but the strength builds up from the inner surface until it reaches a maximum, which is determined by the permeability of the material. And then it drops off at the surface to a value equal to that of a non-magnetic conductor of the same size and shape. Then as the distance from the conductor increases, the field strength becomes less. Now E, hollow magnetic conductor magnetized by current flowing through a central conductor. With this arrangement, such as is used for circular magnetization, the field strength follows the curve shown in the figure, which I have given you earlier. Now E, methods of magnetization. Number 1 is direct current. Straight direct current at voltages from 110 to 440 has excellent penetrating qualities and is suitable for magnetizing parts in coils and with yokes, but it has the disadvantage that it is difficult to change its value as is required for inspecting objects of different sizes. Number 2, half wave rectified direct current. A rectifier in the low voltage high current side of the transformer will produce a pulsating direct current object. Commercial frequency alternating current is readily available in the shop, and by controlling the input AC, the output DC may be adjusted to any value the test calls for. Half wave DC has a good penetrating qualities as straight DC, and its pulsating nature helps distribute the magnetic particles so they will arrange themselves over any fault. Number 3 is alternating current. Remember from our discussion of the principle of magnetization, an object is magnetized when the magnetic domains within the material align with the external magnetizing force. If the magnetizing force is produced by alternating current, it will reverse its cycle and the magnetic polarity will change. The magnetic field produced by AC differs from that produced by DC in that, as we see in figure which I will be giving you, the field strength is almost totally concentrated on the surface of the material. Number 2 is testing medium. The medium that is used to indicate the presence of a fault by magnetic particles inspection must be ferromagnetic. It must be finely divided, must have a high permeability, low retentivity, and for operator safety, it must be non-toxic. There is no one medium that is best for all applications, but in general, these materials are extremely fine iron oxides that are dyed gray, black, red, or are treated with a dye that causes them to fluoresce when they are illuminated with an ultraviolet light. The iron oxides may be used dry, or they may be mixed with kerosene or some other light oil and flowed over the surface. Dry particles require no special preparation, making them well suited for field applications where portable equipment is used. Dry particles are applied with hand shakers, spray bulbs, or powder guns, which I will be giving you figure for that. Particles are flowed over the part as a bath illustrated in figure, this one which I am giving you. The wet method is usually used with stationary equipment which continuously agitates the bath to keep the particles in suspensions. Particles are mixed with the vehicle in proportions recommended by the manufacturer. Pre-mixed magnetic particles baths are also available. The particle concentration of the bath should be closely monitored and adjusted as necessary each time the system is used. Measuring particle concentration is accomplished by collecting a sample of the agitated bath in a centrifuge tube as shown in the figure. The volume of particles which settle out in the bottom of the tube is compared with the table given in this figure. Provided by the manufacturer of the particles. Since the bath is continuously recycled, it may become contaminated and discolored. When this happens, the bath should be drained, the equipment cleaned and refilled with new bath. If a part is now number 3 is testing method, in which a residual magnetism. Number 3 is testing method. Number A is residual magnetism. If a part is magnetized and the magnetizing force is removed before the testing medium is applied, the part is said to be tested by the residual method. This procedure relies on the residual or permanent magnetism in the part. The residual procedure is generally used only with steels that have been heat treated for stressed applications. Number B is continuous magnetization. If the part is still subjected to a magnetizing force when the testing medium is applied, the inspection is being done by the continuous process. The continuous process of magnetization provides a greater sensitivity in locating subsurface discontinuities than does residual magnetism. Now, number 4 is inspection. The dye that is used with the magnetic particle determines the type of light that is used for the inspection. If gray, black, or red dye is used, the inspection is made in white light. If the fluorescent dye is used, the part must be inspected using a black light or in a dark booth. The skill and experience of the experience of the inspector is the critical factor in determining the effectiveness of magnetic particle inspection. Faults that are open to the surface of the faults that are open to the surface of the metal are easy to identify, but some subsurface faults are difficult to detect because there are no strong north and south poles. Now come to inspection. A is a fatigue cracks. Fatigue cracks give sharp, clear patterns, generally uniform and unbroken throughout their length. They are often jagged in appearance as compared with the straight indication of a seam, and may also change direction slightly in localized areas. Now for this I am giving you a figure which is illustrating a fatigue crack. Fatigue cracks are found in parts that have been in service but are never found in new parts. They are usually in highly stressed area of the part where a stress concentration exists. It is important to recognize that even a small fatigue crack indicates positively that failure of the involved parts is in progress. Number B is heat treat cracks. Heat treat cracks have a smooth outline but are usually less clear and have less buildup than fatigue cracks. On thin sections such as cylinder barrel walls, heat treat cracks may give very heavy patterns. For this I am giving you a figure. These heat treat cracks have a characteristic form consisting of short jagged lines grouped together. Now number C is shrink cracks. Shrink cracks give a sharp clear pattern and the line is usually very jagged. Since the walls of shrink cracks are close together, their indication generally build up to less extent than do indication of fatigue cracks. Grinding cracks are fine and sharp but seldom have a build-up because of their limited depth. Grinding cracks vary from single line indications to a heavy network of lines. Grinding cracks are generally related to the direction of grinding. For example, the crack usually begins and continues at right angles to the motion of a grinding wheel, giving a rather symmetrical pattern. Indication of grinding cracks can frequently be identified by means of the relationships. Now number D, seams. Indications of seams are usually straight, sharp and fine. They are often intermittent and sometimes have very little build-up. Now E, hairline cracks. Hairline cracks are very fine seams in which the faces of the seam have been forced very close together during fabrication. Hairline indications are very fine and sharp with very little build-up. Discontinuities of this type are normally considered detrimental only in highly stressed parts. Now F, inclusions. Inclusions are non-metallic materials such as slag material and the chemical compounds that have been trapped in the solidifying ingot during the manufacturing process. They are usually elongated and strong out as the ingot is worked in subsequent processing operations. Inclusions appears in varying sizes and shapes, from strangers easily visible to the eye to particles only from visible under magnetization in a finished part. They may occur as either surface or subsurface discontinuities. Indication of subsurface inclusion are usually broad and fuzzy. They are seldom continuous, nor are they even in width or density throughout their length. Larger inclusion, particularly those near or open to the surface, appear more clearly defined. Close examinations, however, will generally reveal their lack of definition and the fact that the indication consists of several parallel lines rather than a single line. This characteristic will usually distinguish a heavy inclusion from a crack. Non-metallic contaminants that got into the metal when it was cast show up as a broad and fuzzy indications. Five is demagnetization. After the part has been inspected and before it can be returned to service, it must be thoroughly demagnetized. This may be accomplished by either AC or DC demagnetizations. Now A in this AC demagnetization. In order to demagnetize a part, we must subject it to a magnetizing force that is opposite to the force used to magnetize it. This will swing the magnetic domains around. If the magnetizing force is AC, the domains will alternate their polarity, and if the part is slowly removed from the field while the current is still flowing, the reversing action will progressively become weaker and the domains will be left with the random orientation, or in other words, the part will be demagnetized. AC, as we will remember, does not penetrate the surface very deeply. So for complete demagnetization of some parts, we must resort to some other method, such as DC demagnetization. Now the B is DC demagnetization. For deeper penetration that is possible with AC demagnetization, we can use DC. Place the part in a coil through which we can pass more current than was usually used to magnetize the part. Flow a sort of current through the coil and then reverse the direction of flow and decrease the amount. Give it another sort of current. Continue to reverse the direction of flow and decrease the amount until the lowest value of current you can flow has been reached. Check for the presence of any residual magnetism with a magnet strength indicator. The parts must be demagnetized to within the limits specified in the appropriate overall manual. Now number 6 is test sensitivity and standards. It is important to note that many of the factors previously discussed have an effect on the ability of the system to find the type of loss which would determine the serviceability of the part being tested. This is called test sensitivity. Some of the factors which affect the sensitivity of the magnetic particle inspection are method of magnetization, magnetizing amperage, current type AC or DC, type of particles used in method of particle application. A test with high sensitivity will locate small defects, while a test with low sensitivity will reveal only coarse flaws. Once these factors have been determined, the system should be tested using a test bar which has a known flaw. This test bar is the standard for the parts to be tested, which I am giving you a figure to see. Designing magnetic particle inspections for various applications takes experience and special training. However, the airframe and power plant technicians can successfully perform inspections when manufacturer's requirements are adhered to. This specification determine the sensitivity of the test for the technicians. Now I am giving you a figure for the manufacturer requirements for the testing of an engine parts. Any flaw found in these parts when tested accordingly is cause for rejection of the part. Now we have gone through the various things, but one thing I must say to all of you, that whatever you have read about the principle of magnetism, this will be very much helpful for in the case of AC generator, and there we will also learn in electricity about the magnetism, and also it's very much helpful when you will read about the compass, that is an instrument.